Hey, everybody, welcome to the Game Junkie Show, episode 17. And today we are going to talk all about hype. Stare into the smoldering eyes of Mr. Hype himself right here. Sony, baby. Joining us again, we have Matt.
Hello, everybody. Great to be back.
For the second time, we've got Mr. Elegant.
Hello there.
And a first timer, love new blood on the show. We have Madman.
Hello.
So I'm going to start with you, Matt. I mean, this is about hype. Has there ever been a game in the history of your life as a gamer where hype has kind of maybe ruined the game, or where the hype of the game let you down a little bit? Talk about that.
For sure. Yeah, totally. I can think of so many. And even before this, I tried to think about games that didn't live up to the hype and games that did live up to the hype, because I really think that given this such a subjective medium where it really, your personal taste and personal preference for what you like in a game is going to rule whether or not a game lived up to your personal hype. I listed out games that did not live up to the hype and games that did live up to the hype. So I'm actually going to skew positive on this one because I listed out way more games that lived up to the hype than did not, but I can list off a bunch. Really, the one that I think I'm going to go with is Mass Effect Andromeda. That game, I know a little bit about the background of that and how it was developed. I had heard in a video essay on YouTube that they had scrapped their game 14 months before release, and then the game that they started developing at that 14-month mark before release is what we got, and it was a buggy mess. And being as someone that considers the Mass Effect trilogy one of my just the best trilogy in games, aside from perhaps the Batman games, just my background, but I would say Mass Effect Andromeda, it really didn't live up to the hype for me because it just wasn't there for me. I mean, I liked the gunplay, I liked the moment-to-moment action. I thought that was really great. I was able to turn my Ryder, that was the last name of that character, he was the Pathfinder. I was able to turn him into a really awesome sniper, but it just didn't live up to Mass Effect 1 or 2 for me. And even in the Mass Effect trilogy, Mass Effect 3 really didn't live up to my hype either, because of just how kind of lackluster and anticlimactic the endings were for that game. And it wasn't until DLC was released that you kind of got more of those character interactions that everyone loved about the original Mass Effect trilogy. And just the core cast of characters and that were your squad mates just of Mass Effect Andromeda, it did not live up to what they were in Mass Effect 2. I mean, we didn't get Argaris, we didn't get Rex, we didn't get Liara, Caden, Ashley. Like, there was just, I can name them all right now. I can't tell you the names of the people of the Mass Effect Andromeda. I know one of them, the Asari woman was named Petey, I remember that, but I really can't tell you the name of the Turian that was in that. I did really like the Krogan character in Mass Effect Andromeda though, and the story just wasn't it didn't live up to the hype for me. I was really excited for that game, and I was quite disappointed that was not to the level of the original trilogy. And you could tell that they wanted that to be a new trilogy. I mean, I don't think we're going to get a Mass Effect Andromeda 2. There was an announcement that there's going to be a follow-up to Mass Effect, but I hope that it's Mass Effect 4. I hope that it's maybe I don't know what we're going to get for that. Maybe it'll be a prequel. I kind of want to let Shepard be in the past, but I don't think I want to see a Mass Effect Andromeda 2. So I think out of the gate, that's what I'll go with. That's the one that really sticks in my mind of a game that didn't live up to that.
So then, Elegant, I want to ask you a question. When we talk about hype, right, and that's a pretty subjective term, how much of this is on us as consumers? Because we're sold certain ideas in the marketing, right? Like, some companies will sell us an idea of what we think we're going to get. But we also, at least I know for me, I create my own hype in the head and put my own expectations into it. So what are your thoughts on kind of the differences between what a company sells to us and what we as the consumer kind of implant that we think the experience is going to be? So how much of the hype letdown is on us, essentially?
I would say about 0%, which will be, I mean, someone will turn heads on that one. I think it's all about the product at the end of the day. I think at least most of us can handle when we have some perceptions of a game that doesn't really turn out to be that way, as long as it's still a great product. You can be like, okay, yeah, I see what they did. It wasn't for me, but it's still like a solid product. It's functioning and it does what it does well. So I think it's always the end product that everything, yeah, is about, really. And the PR cycle, I see this like notion on Twitter and I don't know, Reddit and stuff, where people are blaming quote unquote gamers and talking about like gamer hype and whatever. And I think that's just wrong, because it's more about the PR cycles. And sure, you could see through that, but I mean, we have this like really recent one, which happens these latest couple months with Abandoned. I mean, the game isn't really out yet, but there's a hype cycle here, which isn't really upon gamers. Even though some people would say it is, that there are some conspiracy theorists out there, but that's because of how their PR cycle is. Like, they're really leaning into that and they know what they're doing. We have other cases like Cyberpunk or Fallout 76, where they were basically over-promising. They were promising stuff that were basically the concept that they wanted the games to be, and they weren't there at launch. Yeah, so I always think it comes down to, if we should blame someone, it's the publisher that released a broken product, or they sold something that it actually isn't. And we're probably going to talk about this, but I have my gripes with Cyberpunk. For like, I never regret a gaming purchase, even when I'm not really like, when the game is not for me. But Cyberpunk for me was, and I played it on PC, and I have a pretty great PC, so it was, and to me it was basically like, they had, the RPG mechanics were really lacking. They were promising an RPG, and it absolutely wasn't an RPG. It had some mechanics in there that some RPGs have, I guess, and there was stuff like that. So yeah, I don't think gamers or should be blamed at all in this case, which might sound weird, but yeah, I think it's ultimately down to the publishers.
It doesn't sound weird at all. I only say that because I know if I try not to watch a lot of videos and teasers, I try to be really careful. I almost didn't play The Last of Us 2 because I was going to listen to the hype, which was really negative, and that almost ruined a great game for me. So I try to be really cautious, but I have seen some people kind of create what they think they're going to get, which is something that was never talked about in the marketing. So I know that there's always kind of this balance there, but I do like that. I mean, you're calling out these companies for what it is. I mean, you promised a lot of stuff and then you completely didn't deliver on it, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. It's I mean, there is this, I mean, when we're talking about hype in general, it's a tough topic, because you kind of have to separate these things, where it's like the PR cycle that tries to generate hype, or the, like, I don't know, the quote unquote gamer hype, or you go to yourself and where you're creating this sort of like universe in your head of what this thing is. I mean, that's probably on you, but as long as the product is a solid one, I don't think you're going to be upset about it, really. You're going to be more like, yeah, okay, that's on me, I guess. And I mean, The Last of Us Part 2 is such an excellent example, because I think people, and that's actually quite a bit on Naughty Dog as well, because they actually advertised this with like Joel being really present, and they were like kind of hinting that he was going to be a force of nature in this game somehow, and it turns out that, spoiler alert, he wasn't. So yeah, it's, again, I think it's all about the PR cycles that ultimately make people upset, or maybe not just the PR cycles, but what gets released on the other end. So yeah, I think gamers are not to blame. Maybe with some, like, of course, there are always some exceptions, but as a general rule of thumb, I think, no, this is absolutely not on gamers at all. And yeah, I'm all for dunking on gamers, and myself included, but in this case, no, absolutely not.
I gotta agree with you there. Mad, let me ask you this because this has me thinking of some other stuff. What are the lines of talking about like Last of Us 2 as an example? Movies do this all the time, TV shows do this all the time. They mislead us so that we get a bigger shock in the story. Like when is that okay? Is it okay? Talk about, do you feel that's okay? Because I understand it, because they wanted to shock us in the story, or they want to hide a really big plot point. But is that really dangerous because of the hype it creates and because of the backlash that happens with consumers? What are your thoughts on?
Well, in certain cases, it's okay, and in certain cases, it's not. Like, okay, an example that I can give of some case that it's not, this is movie related, but when the Lighthouse was being marketed, it was being marketed as this big, like hardcore horror film, right? And when it came out, a lot of people kept complaining that it was more this artistic, psychological horror movie as opposed to this hardcore horror movie that it was being built up to be. So that's a case of something to where the marketing can really hurt a movie or a game in that case. I don't really have an example of where it can be good, because like a game like Fallout 4, for instance, this game was advertised to be exactly what it was supposed to be. This huge open world with these light RPG elements in there. I personally built this game up to be a little bit more than it was actually, in my head, because I'd been waiting since New Vegas for a new Fallout game. And yeah, I built up this Fallout game in my head, and I didn't exactly get that, but it didn't ruin the game for me. This game was still fun. I love this game. But yeah, that actually goes off of what Elegant was mentioning earlier, where people build up uh, hype in their own head. That happened to me a couple times. So yeah, I'm
That's a
living
great
proof of that.
That's a great point. And that's maybe a better articulation of what I was trying to ask is because we all do it. We build up what we think it's going to be. And then if it's not those things, can we objectively say, well, it's not those things, but it's still really good and we still enjoyed it, essentially. So Matt, I'm going to go back to you. If CDPR had stopped that heavy marketing at some point and said, we're just going to be quiet and slow down this hype train, could Cyberpunk have been better received?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it could have. I mean, I think if they hadn't released so many of those videos that were showing off gameplay elements that weren't in the game, like wall running and whatnot, and jumping off the wall, and you're getting in with the mantis blades, I think it would have been better received. And I think if they had been more upfront than with the fact that it's not a super living world, that it's kind of a looter shooter, and that they advertised a game where like ultimate player agency, and you're going to be able to go and follow around NPCs who have this life cycle, and I think that was really an egregious case of just over promising and under delivering. So I think that yes, had they not shown off like years and years in advance all these gameplay trailers that didn't pan out and really weren't representative of what was in the final product, I do think that would have been better received. And really the ultimate game that it's really just, it goes back really far in gaming history of over promising, under delivering. The most egregious I can think of is Peter Molyneux with Fable. He super promised all of these things that would be in Fable, and none of them really panned out. And I mean, I remember loving Fable 2, so that lived up to my hype, but Fable 3, I remember not being so great and not really living up to the hype. But that being the case, I still really enjoyed Fable 3. There were things that I did really like, but it was just yet another instance of Fable over promising and under delivering. And I think the same thing goes with Cyberpunk. Had I not known that they had planned on having wall running and jumping off and landing on a guy with your mantis blades, and like I was really looking forward to doing that. I wanted to have a whole playthrough where I had focused on those mantis blades and kind of was more like slice and dice and then shooting, and that's not really what was delivered. So I do think that yeah, had they gone a little bit quiet, then it would have been more well received. But then at the same time, just to play devil's advocate on myself, had they gone total media blackout, kind of like how The Last of Us was, where they weren't really giving us too much, there was a gigantic leak, and then that was really what ruined the hype. The hype was ruined before the game even came out because people knew that, like, spoiler alert, what happened with Joel. So I think that it's really a really fine line to walk, because if you don't hype up your game, if you don't really get on that marketing train, then people's hype is going to go out of control, like we just witnessed with Abandoned. Everyone's thinking, oh, is this a Kojima game? Oh, is this Silent Hill? Like, them not giving us anything is also building up too much hype in people's heads because of how just subjective and this medium is. And I think a really great question. I think it would have. I think it would have been more well received. Or at least props for me. Because I mean, in the last few years, I haven't been trying to build up games in my head too much, because I feel like I've been burned too many times on that. So I try not to hype up games too much, but I still am. I still do that a lot of the times. Like, I can't wait for the next Spider-Man. I'm hyping that up, but I can't see how Insomnia could not deliver with that because of just how great Spider-Man and Miles Morales were. And I mean, I'm looking forward to the next whatever Naughty Dog is. I hope it's a new IP. I know that Last of Us, I think, is getting a remaster, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I mean, I would like to see a Last of Us remaster in the Last of Us 2 engine, but I'd rather see Naughty Dog focus on a new IP, or perhaps, give us Nathan Drake's daughter. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert if you hadn't beat Uncharted 4, but.
That's okay. I have so many questions after what you said. I'm maturing. I'm actually taking notes. So I'm sort of like trying to do a good job at this hosting thing. So I want to ask Elegant then, do you think it's just as damaging? So we've kind of talked about what happens if you overpromise, right? We've talked about what happens if you do the CDPR, or like what Bethesda did with Fallout 76. Do you think it's equally as damaging if you stay too quiet, if you don't say anything at all? Like, how do you think that's a better strategy? Is it a worse strategy? Is it the same kind of strategy? Talk about that.
I think it depends on the type of game and how you do it. I mean, we have an example in Apex Legends that low-key came out of nowhere. And I mean, they spent millions and millions on PR on the release day when they had like huge streamers playing it, which made it really, people really latched onto that because they saw it on Twitch and everything. But I think the word of mouth is really, really strong. And I think a lot of publishers today are really underestimating that, especially when like social media is in the state it is, where, I mean, if you have a phone, you probably on some sort of social media, and the word of mouth is really, really, really strong. So I think it could be better to not build this hype cycle. I totally get why they do it, but it's also a thing where we're talking about how AAA games get much more expensive to make. And sure, they do, but a lot of that is actually a lot more spending into PR. And there is no metrics to where they can like see their ROI or return of investment on that. So I think if you're really clever, I think it's better to go with that word of mouth in mind, like use Twitch or use social media where you kind of trickle, just to look at Abandon. Like, who the hell would have, like, they haven't had a lot of advertising on like, I don't think they have had any advertising, basically. They have been trickling out this sort of hints here and there. And I think if you can do that, but actually have something to back it up with, I think that's like really, really powerful. And there are some examples of this. So yeah, it's a much smarter strategy. But of course, if you're like a one-man indie team or whatever, your game's probably not going to get picked up. So that's a different story, I guess. But yeah, sure. I think great, like big AAA games could benefit from not having this huge hype cycle. It would save them a ton of money, and it would probably even sell some more copies because people would want to jump on and see what the hell is this that everyone's talking about right now. So yeah, I'm just gonna cycle back to the Cyberpunk question because I thought it was really excellent. I don't think it was gonna be any better received because of what what they received in terms of, yeah, like it wasn't just a broken product. And I know for some people it worked fine. For me, it was a total mess, even if I played it on PC, as I mentioned earlier. Like V was nearsighted for me, like everything, like I think 1 to 1.5 meters away from my character's sight was just a blurry mess, and I know how to tinker with the settings to make that go away basically, and you couldn't, which maybe the toggles were actually broken, I don't know, but I think the state that game shipped in made it, that was the thing that people were really upset about. And I think the example with Fable that was mentioned earlier was like the game worked, so people, yeah, they were pretty upset that some of the things that were promised weren't in there, but the game still worked, so it wasn't that sort of backlash as it was here. But yeah, to summarize it all, I think that not hyping up the game could be much more powerful, and we have seen examples of that.
I just want to say I need a napkin because you're spitting all over my place right now. I got to clean this up. You're spitting so much. That was great. Show's over, guys. That was fantastic. Yeah, I agree with you. I could live without all the things CDPR. I call it the Cyberpunk effect because that's what happened. I can live with you pulling things out of games. I can accept that. I can't accept like a super technically not put together buggy mess. So I totally get what you're saying there. Man, you guys keep making me think of great questions. This is awesome. Mad, let me come back to you. Let's talk really quick about this abandoned fiasco. Is Hassan possibly a PR genius with these little teasers and making us talk about it and talk about it and talk about it? Or is this just insanity on the most ridiculous, I don't know what the hell I'm doing level? What do you think is going on here?
Honestly, I mean, it all depends on what happens with that game, right? If it gets revealed and it's this really good indie horror game, or if it's a Silent Hill or, whatever, then yeah, he's going to look like a PR genius. But in some cases, like if no game comes out at all, he's going to look like one of the biggest internet villains of this decade, basically, because it's even gotten to the point where I'm getting annoyed at this whole thing, because I've seen it floating around, it seems like on a monthly basis, and I'm like, geez, is this game ever going to get revealed or what? But I do like how he's going about it. He's putting out these little teasers, little things like in his tweets or whatever, or on the Blue Box tweets, and they're putting some bait out there, and people are just hooking onto it.
I mean, he's getting people's attention, that's for sure. What if I'll ask you a follow-up question? What if Abandoned is real and it is a decent project and this all didn't become nothing? But what if it isn't that gigantic hyped, like there's no Kojima behind the scenes, there's no Silent Hill? What if it really is a small indie studio and a really good solid indie game, but he did all this crazy shit and people still didn't get that big crazy, like what happens if it's in the middle?
Good question. That's a good question right there. Honestly, it's going to depend on the person. It really depends on the person. If they hyped this thing up to be like a Silent Hill or something Kojima-esque, then they're going to be disappointed, of course. But also, if it's someone who's kind of tempered their expectations like I have, I'm not going to be disappointed. If it's just like a solid indie horror game that really just, has a good atmosphere, has good scares and all that type of stuff, I'm not going to be disappointed by that. And people that have similar thoughts to me, I don't think we'd be disappointed by that. But I can see where some people would be disappointed,
No, I like that take. I love hearing people be able to temper their expectations and say, even if it doesn't have all the things I think it's going to be, I can still enjoy it if it's good. So then, Matt, I'm going to come back to you. I want to touch on some more stuff Elegant talked about. Do you think if there was a shift in how developers did their marketing and their PR, could talking about word of mouth, because in the marketing world, nothing beats word. I'm sorry, but nothing really beats word of mouth, but it is a harder analytic to measure, especially in this industry. What do you think about the hype that gamers create without marketing? I mean, do you think that might be better for developers, or do you think, because there are a lot of rumors and there are a lot of rabbit holes, do you think it might be potentially a little more dangerous?
That's another great question. It actually makes me think of something I thought I was having. To answer your question, the immediate question, I think that word of mouth is better. And I think that something that could help word of mouth is get back into the age of demos. There was a Last of Us demo. There was a Last of Us 1 demo. I played it. I loved it. There was a Batman Arkham Asylum demo. I put in more time in the Batman Arkham Asylum demo than I have in some games that I bought at full price at launch. And this was, in 2009. So I think getting back to the demo age would help that word of mouth, and it would help to temper your expectations, and you're getting a slice of what the game is. You know what to expect. So I think getting back to that age would be the best thing to do. And we kind of are with the open betas. We just had a Halo beta. I've been playing the Back 4 Blood beta, and I'm really enjoying that. I probably ain't going to get that. And I think that another thing that really helps is crossplay. I think that we need to just continue with crossplay. I have a friend who lives in another state who, was a childhood friend of mine, and he's a PC gamer, and I'm on PlayStation, and we can play together. We can play Call of Duty together. We were doing the Back 4 Blood beta together. We were playing Knockout League, that dodgeball one. I might get the wrong name there, but we were playing that together, So I think the age of demos needs to come back, especially for new IP. Maybe an established IP, maybe not, but like using Spider-Man as an example, I think that game for me was going to be great no matter what, because Spider-Man is, full transparency, probably my favorite character in pop culture. I just love him, and I think that video games are the best medium for Spider-Man, because swinging through New York City as Spider-Man is just a super rush. I mean, I remember the one time I visited New York City, I was right in Times Square looking at those red stairs, and you can go into that area in Spider-Man, and just looking up at the skyscrapers, your first thought is Spider-Man could exist. Spider-Man could be in this city. And another city, I think in China, where there's gigantic skyscrapers, I think you can drop Spider-Man into there too. Anywhere there's just huge landscapes of just buildings, Spider-Man can exist in. And I think that would have been a game that should have had a demo, though. I mean, just the demo that they played at E3, why can't that be released to the public? Any demos that they have for E3, why can't that be released to the public? And I mean, I think someone could, disagree with that thought and say, oh, well, it's a hell of a lot easier to get a canned little demo at E3 than it is to put something out to the public. But I think that we need to get back to the demo age. I think that would help with word of mouth, and it would have helped with expectations. I think that had Cyberpunk had a demo, we would have known what we were getting. We would have known that was a looter shooter. And actually, to go with a point that that Elegant made, great point. It was not a game that should have been on base consoles. They probably should have released it and said, this is a PlayStation 4 Pro game. This is an Xbox. Xbox One is I'm not quite sure of the Xbox ecosystem, but just this is a game for enhanced consoles, PC, and the next generation. This isn't a game for a PlayStation that you got in 2014. I think that should have been something they were upfront with. And one thing I kind of want to ask is, why does Bethesda get excused for launching a broken game like Skyrim in 2011 and continued on, but then Cyberpunk is ragged on for releasing a game like that? I think Cyberpunk had a worse launch than Skyrim, but I have a very distinct memory of playing Skyrim, running down in Whiterun, leaving the big castle there is at Dragon's Reach. I might be wrong, but just going out of that castle, and I'm running out, and I get to the point where there's like a moat in the stairs. I jumped off, landed in the water, and my game crashed. I couldn't go in water in that game. I couldn't swim. And then that made me really disillusioned with that game. And I ended up trading it in. And then I didn't get it back until a little bit later on PS3. And I think that because I had an Xbox 360 for a little bit, had a huge run of Red Ring of Death, really ruined my experience with Xbox. And I actually ended up skipping the Xbox One generation because I had a PS3 and then a PS4. But I mean, Skyrim is probably a game that I bought the most. I was actually talking to my friend about this. Like, I bought it on Xbox 360. I bought it a few times on PS3, and then by like maybe the second time I had it on PS3, it was actually a playable experience, and it became one of my favorite games of all time. But just why does Bethesda get excused, but then Cyberpunk they don't? Maybe it's because The Witcher 3 is one of the greatest games of all time, and had a really great launch. Maybe that's why they don't. Maybe there was like a pedigree that they established that we expected from them. But I think that was a really great point of Elegant. I mean, had it not had that experience, had it not had been such a shaky launch for Cyberpunk, I think that it might have been more well received if they hadn't tried to broadcast so much of the stuff that they overpromised on. But I was going back to another question there. But yeah, to really sum up your question though, I think demos would help in the age we're in now to really temper the hype train and to really show what your game is going to be to the public without having everyone build it up in their heads, and they can actually get a slice of that experience. Because with that Last of Us demo, you knew exactly what you were getting. With that Batman Arkham demo, you knew exactly what you were getting. And if you didn't like in Batman Arkham Asylum that he has detective vision and he can see through walls, you saw that immediately in the demo, and you knew if that was going to be for you or not. You also got a slice of that that counter system and combat system that kind of revolutionized games. I mean, without, like we were saying before in the pre-show, without that combat system, it wouldn't have been in the Middle Earth games, Lord of the Rings, the Shadow of Mordor. It wouldn't have been in Mad Max, and then Spider-Man even largely influenced on that as well. So yeah, to answer your question, I think word of mouth is definitely better, and I think to a certain degree though, they need these big marketing campaigns just because we are just so inundated with games. There's just so much to pick from. Everyone has a gigantic backlog. I'm sure you look at Xbox Game Pass, look at the just plethora of games on there. But I think to get back to the age of demos, I think it would be great. I'm really liking seeing these open betas. I want to see it happen more often.
Oh my God, I love demos. I remember back in the day on a PS1, you could request a disc that had 4, 5, 6 different games on it that you could demo. And this also made me think, and Elegant touched on it earlier, marketing is very expensive on this level. So when we look at games having a $100 million budget, a huge chunk of that is PR and marketing. Is it more cost efficient to do betas and I don't know the answer to that because I don't know the technical specs. One thing that really made me, and I know I haven't gotten a demo, there's no demo of Horizon Forbidden West, but the way they did that reveal in the state of play felt like an honest demonstration for me. No, I didn't get to experience the button mapping and the mechanics in my own hand, which is nice, but I do feel like it was an honest look at what we've improved, what we've done, and what new things you'll get to see. And we got to kind of see. So even if they did more of that, I think maybe I would be happier. People would be happier. So I want to ask Elegant. I'm proud of myself for this question. I'm going to ask you here next. When we talk about companies recovering, right? We know that Bethesda made some mistakes with Skyrim and with 76. We know CDPR messed up with Cyberpunk. And then we look at much smaller teams like The Ascent and No Man's Sky. Certainly, it's a lot harder for indie devs or smaller teams to recover. Can you talk a little bit about that dynamic? Like should we care as consumers? A mess up is a mess up. Should we be more lenient with the smaller people? Are we naturally more lenient with the big developers because we've loved their AAA titles before? So kind of tell us your thoughts on that.
Ooh, that's a really tricky question. First of all, I just have to say that hell yeah, to go back to demos. I think that's excellent to set the expectations right, and I think that that's just literally a game changer. And it's weird that they have gone for years without doing that. It's getting back on track a bit, which is awesome. I think Halo Infinite will benefit massively from that technical preview, as they called it, and I think Back 4 Blood will as well. Even if I was sort of disappointed in it, and I love Left 4 Dead, so it's a tough one. I think no, of course. I mean, I'm a firm believer that you deserve second and maybe third and fourth chances. So I don't think we as I mean, each to their own, right? But for me personally, I can forgive, even if they have a few screw ups, I think Bethesda is one of those examples where, you know, if Starfield turns out to be a solid game, it's probably going to be a bit janky. Like we know it's going to be a bit janky, but if it's a solid game, we're gonna probably give it a higher score just because we're gonna be rooting for them and say like, oh god, they actually made a functional game at launch. That's fantastic, and it's gonna get 9 out of 10. And I don't know, which is, yeah, I think I love these sort of like redemption stories. In some ways I don't, because I feel like there has been a lot of companies kind of banking on them, being like, okay, let's absolutely not put the full version out there and let's patch it later. Which is, I mean, since Anthem and 76 and Cyberpunk, I feel like we've seen this year a massive increase in people delaying their games, which of course naturally has to do with COVID, but I think a lot of these games would have been released anyway if there hadn't been such a backlash for these games. But yeah, I don't know. And should we be more patient with smaller teams? Maybe. I don't know. It's still like, it's your money. You put down money for a product, and if it's not functioning, I think I would be equally pissed if it was a AAA or if it was a smaller team, if I felt like I got a non-functioning product, basically. I think The Ascent is a really interesting game in that, like, I love that game. It's literally one of my game of the years so far. I had such a blast playing it, and seeing all the issues that people had with it in terms of stability bugs is just, yeah, it's a mess, and I feel really sorry for them, because obviously this game weren't probably not tested properly, and they released it into the wild too early. Like, it wasn't ready for me.
Did you have those issues? The game was...
No. I had 2 bugs, and one was a dead body that were basically out of screen. I could see like in the outer edge of the screen that it was dead, and it just flew off, which was kind of funny. It didn't affect my gameplay. I saw it because I think most people wouldn't have seen it, but I come from like competitive FPS games, so obviously my eyes reacted immediately. And I had this where when you try to quit to main menu and it just didn't, so you basically have to hard quit the game, which, I mean, it wasn't ideal, but it wasn't a deal breaker either. But apart from that, it was almost perfect. I had some scaling issues, I think, but yeah, I don't know. It was, I love that game. It was working flawlessly almost for me. So yeah, it's, I don't know. And I think it's very clear that people aren't really forgiving about this. I see a lot of people that are like, oh, I want to love this because it looks amazing, but I'm having so much trouble with the multiplayer side of things, or like I'm running into these issues and invincible walls, and there are bosses not spawning, or they're spawning too many bosses, and it's like, it's a mess. And I don't think people are going to get back to that. I think that's where people draw the line, that we tend to get back to the AAA stuff later, and the indies, if they are broken at launch, we don't get back to them really, which is kind of a shame. So I mean, the exception is probably No Man's Sky, I guess, but other than that, I feel like people draw a line in the sand where they're like, okay, this AAA game is broken right now, but I can play it in a year perhaps if it's functional, and if a game like The Ascent is broken now, they're not going to get back to it, because there are so many games releasing, and yeah, people tend to go with the big brands, I guess. I don't know. It's a tough question. It's an interesting one though, and I think it's very subjective, because everyone has the right to do whatever they want when they have put their money down. And you know, if you want to, if you feel betrayed and you don't to it, and maybe you don't even want them to succeed later, I mean, that's up to you, of course.
Right. No, I mean, I like that you said these things, because people's experiences are different. I mean, I know I played Assassin's Creed Valhalla on PS5, and my God, the bugs. I mean, it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. That was far worse than playing Cyberpunk was for me. And my neighbor's got a PS4, and it was like, dude, it was like he was going to the beach and sipping Mai Tais. He had no issues with it. So it is very subjective when if you don't experience it, you don't experience it. So I totally see why there's some divides. And I do agree with what you said. AAA developers have an advantage there, and they know it. They know people will come back to them, and they know people will support them. So that's something to think about when we are supporting indie developers. Matt, I want to come back to you, and I do want to circle back to the demo. So I think we're all kind of in agreement that demos are fantastic because it lets you try before you buy. So what about Game Pass in that regard? Does Game Pass have a lot of value in the context of that's a great way for me to try games I'm not sure about and then know if I want to buy them? So is something like that, can that be viewable as a demo experience, or can Microsoft find a way to use that in context with demos for games?
Actually, that's a great question. As someone who does have Game Pass, I have Game Pass Ultimate. I use it kind of as like what back in the day would be considered renting games. You know, where I would go to the store, I'd pick up a game, I'd go back home, play it, see if I liked it. If I liked it enough, I bought it. You know, and if I didn't, I just take it back and then rent another one. That's kind of how Game Pass is, but it's digital only in that sense. You know, you download games onto your system, you try them out. If you like them, great. You can keep playing them. You can buy them if you want to. But if you don't, you can just uninstall it, go look at the games, and then, you know, download another one that you see that you would like. So yeah, there's a lot of value in Game Pass because there's so many games across so many different genres, and you're paying like $15 a month for Game Pass Ultimate, which is a ridiculous value in that aspect. There are some games on there that I'm trying right now, like Ori and Mamadora and a bunch of these indie Metroidvanias that I really haven't seen that much marketing for, but I'm playing them because they're on Game Pass, and I am loving them to death. So yeah, there's a lot of value in something like Game Pass.
I'm glad that you said that, because it just made me think of another question. If we can all probably agree that to an extent, I know what to expect from Ubisoft games. To an extent, I know what to expect from Naughty Dog. To an extent, I know what to expect from bigger developers that I've played a lot of titles from. Indie developers can't really say that. It took a couple games for me to say, I think I know what Detroit Become Human is going to be because I've played all of Quantic Dream's games, or like I know. So indie development, there's less budgeting there. So perhaps on a demo side, this is significantly harder for indie developers. So Matt, do you have any ideas for what can indie developers do? Because we don't, I mean, should they rely more on word of mouth and on, like what Elegant said, where Halo did kind of a technical preview? Is that maybe kind of the future for indies versus demos, or could indies maybe get more into a beta phase?
You said Matt, right? Not Matt. You said me. You took me. Okay, good. Yeah, just want to make sure. Yeah, I think that indies would be. I mean, I said demos before, but I think I'll say it again. I think that demos would really help indies, and I think word of mouth really helps indies. I mean, I've been hearing that, like, Hades is like the darling of the games community right now. It just got released on Xbox Game Pass. I think that's going to super help that game. And as someone who doesn't have an Xbox, but is kind of in the market for an Xbox Series X, because I want to play Halo, I want to play Starfield. One quote got me on Starfield: Skyrim in space. I need that in my veins. But I think that would really help. I mean, I think word of mouth would help indies. And you made a great point when you just said when they don't have an established pedigree of kind of how their games are, that I think that kind of hurts. And especially if you haven't heard of them, you're less likely to jump in. I think one indie game that would have helped with word of mouth, or at least a demo that I played, was Greedfall. I felt like I was playing a PS3 game, honestly, so I didn't really love it. Maybe I'll get back into that someday, but I love a game with a good character creator, and if the character creator, like, I could spend days or hours in a character creator just testing the limits of it. I know a good character creator if I'm able to make $2, like I did that in Saints Row 2, and ever since then I always go back. I need to try to make $2 first, and if I can't get bald head completely shaved, then your character creator is shit. But, so that's what I try to do. Like I try to I test the limits of it, and Greedfall had some really janky characters. Their characters are kind of fugly. I couldn't really get into that one, and I also, in the running around, like, a game breaks for me when you run into an invisible wall and your character keeps moving. If there's going to be an invisible wall, make your character just stop walking and don't let them walk anymore. So yeah, I mean, to get back to your question, I think what would help indies is word of mouth and demos. I don't really play too many indie games, honestly, so I don't think I can really say much more than that on that topic. But I think demos would help everybody. I think demos would help just set expectations. And I said it once, I'll say it again. And I think I should give indies more of a chance, but I think I'm just, in my head, in the back of my mind, I feel like I'm more liable to get burnt from an indie than I would from a AAA game where I haven't established, like, I know what I'm getting. I think the only, like, maybe AAA-esque is that you kind of don't know what you're getting every time is Kojima, because I don't think anyone could have predicted Death Stranding. I still haven't played that one. I'm thinking about going back if there's a sale on that one, but I think word of mouth helps Kojima the most, because everyone just, like, he really is, like, one of the, like, pillars of gaming. But yeah, with indies, to sum up what I said, I think word of mouth helps. I think with indies, what hurts them is they can't put the money into PR. They can't put the money into their marketing campaigns. So I think demos would help them, and just or getting their games on Game Pass. I think that was really what would really help them. Like Hades, Hades just got on Game Pass, but after so long, Hades has been out for a while, I feel like.
Yeah, and I've been able to have a couple indie developers on the show, and a publisher as well. And from what I understand, when you do work with the publisher, there's less control you have as a developer. So there's probably a lot of dynamics as to why it's not that easy. But as we're talking about this, how cool would that be to pull up your store, whether you're now Elegant, I'm PC stupid, so I think that like Steam, you go to Steam, that's okay. Like I'm not real PC smart, I apologize. So you go to Steam, right? Or you go into the Xbox store or the PlayStation store. And I know you can go in and look at some screenshots and videos, but that would be super dope to be able to get even just a 10-15 minute demo of what you're getting would be really cool. So this makes me think of yet another question. I'm going to ask Elegant this. I might actually ask everyone this, because I feel like this is another good question. Can it be dangerous to you if you're a developer and you've got a lot of hype behind your name, right? I mean, we thought CDPR, we thought Cyberpunk would be on the level of Witcher 3, right? We thought Fallout 76 would be like Fallout 4, right? So what if Naughty Dog or Insomniac or Rockstar made a meh game at launch? So how dangerous is it for you as a top tier developer to have that kind of hype for a community where people just expect you to shit greatness?
Ooh, that's a great question again. First of all, I'm gonna circle back to so I don't lose that thread, to the demo thing with indies. I mean, this is basically a thing right now, or basically it's a huge thing right now with Steam, with the early access programs, where Hades got a name, really. Like it had a pretty substantial fan base already in early access, and we have a thing like the Steam Game Festival where there are like 900 demos or something like that, and there are a few games that people just latch onto and they're super happy about, and they know what they're getting because they've tried the product, or I mean a part of it. So I tried a few myself this summer at Steam Game Festival, and I definitely have them wishlisted, and I'm super ready when they're out. And I would like to see that in the PlayStation Store, or I would like to see that in the Xbox Store, where there's a literal section of like, here are an early access section where you probably don't pay 600, or like that is Swedish crowns, so you probably don't pay 60 like US dollars, but that would be very helpful, I think, to a lot of indie developers. So please get us an like early access program, even on the Microsoft Store and the PlayStation Store. That would be awesome. To go back to the question that, if it's dangerous, I think it's the most dangerous for those, like for the developers, because they have something to really live up to. So they have to push themselves even further. And we know that with a lot of AAA games, there is a level of crunch involved, not from every studio, and not all of it is, this overarching thing where they have evil bosses with the whip out and forcing you to work. But we have a studio like Naughty Dog, where it's like a culture to do this, which isn't the best either, I guess. So I think in that sense, it's dangerous. I think if they release a meh game, I think they're probably gonna get some roasting, and some people are gonna be disappointed, but I don't think it's gonna be the end of the world at all, because we already have a relationship with them. We know what they can make. And I doubt they would put out a meh game. I mean, if they put out an 8 out of 10, that would probably be considered meh with their standards, right? So that's maybe a thing, but in most cases, I just think it's something good, really. If you have an established name, people know what to expect. Yeah, and you can even do more of what you're already doing, and don't really develop that too much, and you can still be successful. So yeah, I don't really see that as a bad thing, really. And I think that's where a demo could come into play as well. So if you know that you basically not have a fantastic game, or you basically have more of what you had with your last game, then put it out there and let people see that. And a lot of people are going to be super excited for that. So yeah.
Awesome. So then you guys keep making me think of questions. I'm going to ask Mad this question. When I play games from different developers, it's clear that developers have a style. There's a branding. There's a lot of games I bet we could play if we didn't know who made it, and we could probably have an idea. Like a lot of Naughty Dog games use the same camera angle, the same type of button mapping. There's similarities in the mechanics. Rockstar is really consistent about it. Ubisoft is very consistent about it. Is essentially what I'm asking is that kind of okay? Can companies, as long as you develop good, authentic games, can you just keep doing the thing you're good at, and the world is the gaming community is going to be happy? Just keep doing what you do.
Yeah, I mean, it can totally work. If you establish yourself with this identity, these mechanics or whatever, and they're good, and you can consistently keep them at that good level that you establish, then yeah, you can easily get away with just sticking with one identity. But there are times where, you as a developer think, oh, this formula that we've established, we want to do something different. And then they don't kind of, take the time to really flesh it out, and it doesn't really work. Like with Resident Evil, I tell people this all the time. If Capcom had just stuck with the survival horror formula, but they kind of, just expanded upon that, like they did with 7 and 8, for 5 and 6, those games would have been better received. But because they didn't do that, they went with the more action style, and they really didn't think about establishing the horror into that action. It really just did not help those games at all. And so those games, while 5 did well sales-wise, critically it wasn't received too well. Same with 6. It did well sales-wise, and I bought that game on launch, but it wasn't received too well critically. I personally can't stand that game. But yeah, but with 7 and 8, I feel like Capcom really got back into the swing of things. They went with that survival horror style that they know, and they brought it into a new perspective, but they kept that soul from the previous games on the PS1, that survival horror style. And look at 7 and 8. They are huge successes. So yeah, as long as companies do not think that they know better than what they I guess what I'm saying here is, as long as companies don't lose their way, then yeah.
So what it sounds like to me really is it, even you create new IPs, right? You change the style of games that you make, but if you keep your formula to what, don't fix what isn't broken. So if you keep your formula, if your formula is good and you keep it, give us new IPs, give us creativity, give us changes, but that formula is what we're hyped about as consumers. And if you fuck with that formula too much, that can be where that hype train, essentially, it's what it sounds like you're saying, which I think is at least where I'm at.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's basically what I'm getting at here.
Sure, that makes total sense. So Matt, let me ask you, because we know Twitter is full of rumor mills, right? There's a lot of blue check marks that have inside sources, and they've read things on grains of rice that tell them what games are coming out next. How destructive are these rumors to the levels of hype, and how much can they impact the negativity or maybe even the positivity of what's received? I mean, we saw the fiasco with, we thought we were getting a Nintendo Switch Pro, and then we see we're getting an OLED, and a lot of that was rumor based. So how destructive do you think kind of perpetuating in the rumor mill is when we talk about that word of mouth?
Yeah, another quick question. Your questions are spot on today. I want to circle back on one point. I think innovation is important in games. In some games, especially, like I think Call of Duty is a game where I could use a little bit more innovation. I think sports games are really hitting a wall these days, where like Madden, I feel like really isn't that well received anymore. NBA 2K and whatnot, because they don't innovate on themselves. But to play devil's advocate on that point, I think Splinter Cell and Ubisoft, I think they shot themselves in the foot with Conviction and Blacklist, because I like those games a lot. I like the more action style to it. There was still definitely stealth, but you go online and you can, it's clear as day that people want chaos theory. They don't want Blacklist, and I think that's what killed Splinter Cell. We haven't had a Splinter Cell in I don't know how long, and I think it's because they tried to change the formula, and there was backlash. But to go off of your rumor mill, I think that it does. I think that it can kill the hype, but at the same time, people know that rumors are just rumors. I don't know how many games of rumor mills I read of The Last of Us or God of War, or these Sony exclusives. I think that when people know that this is someone that, like, I guess if it's someone that their rumors are always spot on, then it might build up the hype train a little bit. But usually I take rumors with a grain of salt. And if you go on Reddit, you can read all the rumors that you want. You can see leaks and whatnot. I don't think that rumors add to the hype train that much, but that's just my personal taste, because I think that I just don't put any stock in them. I don't put any stock into it unless it is the developer telling me what the game is. Like, I'm not going to believe some check mark that's telling me that, like, Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man, Venom's going to be in it, and that was a rumor, I'm sure, that came up or that I had read, and I didn't put any stock in that. Maybe that wasn't said, but rumors that but at the same time, talk on Naughty Dog and how it was brought up earlier, where they literally added scenes with Joel that were a different character completely. That in itself is a rumor. That added to the rumor train that this Joel is going to have this huge part in the game, and that it was a complete 180 on our expectations, and it wasn't what was in the game. So I think in that case, Naughty Dog kind of contributed to the rumor mill. But yeah, I guess I don't really think that rumors really contribute that heavily to hype, at least my hype, my own personal, like, subjective taste in games, because I just don't believe them. I just don't put any stock in them usually.
Well, I can tell you, because I use Twitter pretty actively, there are a whole lot of people that do invest in that, or at least it seems, and that's okay. That's on them. But I do tend to think if you buy too much into things that aren't, like, everybody's telling me you're not going to get Forbidden West this year. Well, when Gorilla tells me I'm not getting Forbidden West this year, then I'm not getting Forbidden West this year. And if I don't, that's okay. But I would like for Gorilla to tell me themselves. So then, Elegant, I have a question for you. And you brought up that work from home environments are harder in this industry because of security and the technical issues and home internet and stuff. So we have seen more leaks than ever, or at least it feels like it. How destructive are those? Because those can kind of go either way as far as hype. So talk about that.
Ooh, yeah. First of all, I'm going to cycle back again, which is, I love that we do that, because, yeah, these questions are on point today. Yeah, I'm going to circle back to the identity thing, where it's, where you can basically spot the publisher or the developer on the type of game you're playing. If you didn't know it was a Ubisoft game you were playing, you were probably going to guess it was Ubisoft, and etc. I think you could stay true to that identity and use your formula as as a sort of framework. But I also think, like Matt said, it's really important to keep innovating and push that framework and that formula. Just don't scope creep and you'll probably be fine. But just do what you do, but do it better, basically, and find new ways to do it. So I like that discussion a lot. Maybe that's a different podcast even, who knows.
Could be, certainly.
Yeah,
could be
but the leaks, I don't know. I guess they could be kind of, I don't think they're that destructive, really, the leaks, if I'm being honest, because the gaming community on Twitter is such a small part of the gaming community as a whole. So I don't think they really matter all that much, if I'm being honest. I have a lot of friends and family that are quote unquote gamers, and they didn't even know about the Last of Us 2 leaks. So they found out in the game, and they are pretty savvy with this thing. They keep up with the gaming news and everything, and they still didn't know about this. So I don't think the leaks are as destructive as we might think, because we are in that environment, and to us that's the gaming universe, and it's absolutely not. So no, I don't think the leaks are that destructive, unless it's we're talking these hacks where source code and other stuff are leaking. That's really bad. But if we're talking about story leaks, or we're talking about how is this game gonna play, I don't really think it matters in the grand scheme of things. It sucks for us if we get the story spoiled, if that's something we care about, really. I know that a lot of people have already got Halo Infinite spoiled. I probably got it spoiled for me as well, but it was all it felt like it was made up, so I'm not going to say anything about it. Maybe it wasn't a spoiler. Who knows? Yeah. So no, I don't think the leaks are that destructive, in the grand scheme of things, because it basically only touches us that are in this sort of Twitter environment or Reddit or whatever, and yeah, we're a percentage of the great big gaming community.
Right. And it just so happens to be, if you are in the gaming community and you frequent social media, then you're probably going to encounter the vocal minority. I mean, I think the numbers clearly speak that most people who play video games really just enjoy it, and we can overlook a lot of these things. So I think that's
I think
a
I
wonderful
have
point.
to point that out because the Nintendo Switch OLED was mentioned, and I think that's where it could be destructive because there were a lot of quote unquote leaks where there were so many like check marks and media, and they were so convinced and they were like, yeah, we can confirm this is basically a Switch Pro and it's 4K and whatever. That was destructive, like because the backlash that got was that couldn't have been fun for anyone. So in that case, that was people were pissed. Even those who weren't really following the news cycle were kind of annoyed because there were, I mean, it basically were everywhere that Nintendo is releasing a better Switch, basically. So even if you aren't like that into following the news, you have probably read at least one article in some newspaper or media outlet somewhere. So in that case, it can be very destructive. And I think even, yeah, not in terms of sales because it's already sold out everywhere, I think, but in just general, like the overall feel, probably both for Nintendo and the customers and everything like that. So yeah, leaks could be destructive, but I don't think like story leaks and stuff like that is that destructive in the grand scheme of things at all.
I think that's a great point. And I love that you said Nintendo sales aren't affected. Like somebody could watch a Nintendo Switch, push the red button that sends the world into like nuclear war, and people be like, I'm still buying that Switch. Like people
Definitely.
love their Nintendo games.
I would queue up for that one.
Yeah. Oh, the Switch it'll be okay. Just buy the Switch. We'll be fine. We'll get over it.
Yeah.
So earlier, Elegant, you had mentioned something, and I'm gonna this spawned a question I'm gonna ask Mad. I know that when I grew up playing games in the 80s and 90s, when we scored games, right? So if you saw a score for a movie or a game and you looked at it and said, oh, I'm hyped for that number. If we saw a 5, we would say, okay, that's average, and average isn't bad. So I still might really enjoy that game. But now you put a 7 on a game and they're like, that's shit. A 7 is a terrible score. I don't know how that mentality shifted. That will definitely be a future episode. But to try to keep that brief, do you think that change in mentality of consumers is affecting levels of hype and kind of affecting what people are expecting? And are some people maybe being unreasonable in those expectations?
Yes and no. I mean, it all depends on the person, obviously. Because for me, I see a 7 on a game and I'm like, okay, that's good. There's some flaws there, obviously, but I can forgive those if I think the game is fun. But there are people, mostly that are younger than me, that would base games off of scores, and they do see a 7 as just like, okay, yeah, I'm going to stay away from that. And, basically 8 is like the lowest that they'll possibly go before they say, okay, yep, not touching that. So, yeah, it really depends on the person specifically.
Sorry, I didn't get to the mute button in time. No, that completely makes sense. So it really, and when you say it depends on the person too, it's the way we view the scale. Like I look at a scale, and if I see like a 1 or a 2 or a 3, I go, oh, that's very questionable in
Yes.
lots of aspects. But if I see a 6 or a 7, I might say, well, maybe it doesn't have the best story and the best gunplay, but it still could be a really fun game. So
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So let's do this then, because I think this would be really fun to close out with. And I think this might take a little bit of time. So I want to make sure that we end on a positive note. So talk about a video game title that lived up to the hype you had for it. And just take some time to gush about that game. And since we've got you, Mad, I'll go ahead and just start with you on that.
Okay, so a game that kind of lived up to the hype that I had built up for it. What's one that I can think of off the top of my head? Castlevania, Lords of Shadow. I was hyped as hell for that game because, okay, Castlevania is my favorite franchise in the world. I love it. I love it more than anything else in the gaming world. And when Lords of Shadow was announced, I followed that game from the moment that it was announced up until it was released. And I was hyping it up and hyping it up. And I'm like, okay, what's this game going to be like? And as soon as I got it, I was like, oh my God, this is great. Because it has kind of like a God of War style combat system, but I was like, okay, that's fine. It can totally work for Castlevania, and the level design was great. The music, just like every other soundtrack in the entire series, was phenomenal. If I could, I would buy a CD for that and just blast it out in public if I could. But yeah, that game totally lived up to the hype that I had built up for it. So yeah,
Hell
that's
yeah.
one for me personally.
That's a great one. Matt, I'll go with you next. Same question. What game absolutely lived up to the hype?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and it's actually something I did a little bit before this, so I have listed out a bunch of them. I think every time I'm on here, I mention Spider-Man, so that's one of them. My background right now is Batman Arkham Asylum. I already mentioned that one. I think I'm going to go with Assassin's Creed 2, because Assassin's Creed 1, I loved. I didn't read the reviews for that. So I really enjoyed it. I learned way later that people thought it was repetitive and people didn't love it. What I loved was just running around, the Middle East, all these, Jerusalem, Acre, all these places. And I absolutely loved it. It was free running in that game. That was one of the first times I experienced that in a game. And I thought it was really revolutionary. I absolutely loved it. So, Assassin's Creed 1 lived up to the hype for me, but I would say Assassin's Creed 2, because the second that got announced, the first thing they announced was his name. Ezio Auditore da Firenze. That was the first thing they released for that game. The moment I heard that, I was like, Renaissance Italy, let's go. More color, more vibrance with the world. This is going to be great. And it delivered 100%. I mean, it launched the Ezio trilogy. He's the only assassin that they stuck with for multiple games, And the song Ezio's Family is now pretty much the theme song of Assassin's Creed. My friend who I mentioned who does PC gaming, he also makes beats. And I got him to put an 808 trap beat behind Ezio's Family, and it slapped. I'll tell you, it was so good. I mean, it's trademarked, so he can't release it or anything, but oh man, that was a vibe. So I would go Assassin's Creed 2, and the fact that they let you put on like not microtransactions, but like the way that they did Uplay, and now it's the Ubisoft Connect store. I loved that. Like they let me have the Altair outfit in Assassin's Creed 2 from the jump. I mean, I even have the Ezio trilogy, like the remaster for PS4, and I beat it all again before Assassin's Creed Origins came out, and I still have it. And I love the Altair outfit. I think that can. So I mean, people might not agree with me, but I think that it looks great in every single game that they've ever put it in. And if they do put it in, I use it. And beating that game with the Altair outfit was so awesome, and because it was I got to have my favorite assassin to that point. Because I mean, I think Ezio, I do like Ezio a little bit more, but I love that outfit that Altair had. And having that in Assassin's Creed 2 in a better game was just so awesome. The DLC was great for that. And then what even blew that out of the water was Brotherhood. Brotherhood was just like better than Assassin's Creed 2, I thought. I mean, it was really Assassin's Creed delivered for a really long time for me. And I think with Revelations, it got a little shaky. Assassin's Creed 3, we were like, oh, yeesh, what's happening here? I didn't love Assassin's Creed 4 because I don't like the naval ship stuff. I'm not really a huge fan of that. It's not my cup of tea. So that's why I kind of didn't jive with Odyssey as well. But Assassin's Creed 2 is just one of my favorite games of all time. And I got a couple others that really lived up to the hype. Halo 3, Ghost of Tsushima recently, Red Dead 1 and 2, I love. But I would say, aside from Batman, which is my background right now, Assassin's Creed 2 was the one that really just knocked it out of the park for me, lived up to the hype. And that's why I kind of want to end on the positive that hype doesn't have to ruin games, because it's that high you get. It's like if you're super hyped for a game and then it delivers to your own personal taste, it's awesome. Then you just if the hype doesn't ruin a game for me and it super lives up, I don't go look at reviews. I don't go look on Reddit because I don't want to see the people crapping all over it. I want to just live in my little bubble where this is like the best game I've ever played. Like Assassin's Creed Origins, I didn't look at anyone's stuff. I ended up playing 350 hours of that game, and I played it for months on end because it was like one of the only games I was playing. And I'm honestly, I'm in mourning because they're killing Assassin's Creed. It's like, look how they massacred my boy. You know, it's like they're about to go Fortnite style battle royale, you know, free to whatever, you know, Assassin's Creed Infinite. You know, I'm not looking forward to that. And Valhalla, I was a little disappointed in. Way too many microtransactions. I came into a bunch of gift cards, and I was a sucker, and I bought microtransactions for that. I don't really love that I contributed to that culture, but at the end of the day, it's my money, whatever. But you know, Assassin's Creed 2. If we could get back to the old style of Assassin's Creed games, I would love that. I'd love to see Bayek in another game, Assassin's Creed Origins 2. I'd love to see that one.
You know, you can get him on the ship, Cassandra's Odyssey.
Yeah, I
you
did
can
do
get Bayek and Aya and Eve, and then you could.
Yeah.
There was 1 week you could do special challenges, and I believe you can get Enzio's outfit with the whole hood and everything. It was
Yeah,
only
I did
for
that.
1 week. Yeah, I got that bitch.
Yeah. And Valhalla actually released Bayek's, no, they released Altair's outfit and Ezio's outfit in Valhalla right now. Yeah, I love to see that. I love to see them do the legacy outfits because a lot of them have been really great. But yeah, just because you said to gush on a game, I would say Assassin's Creed 2. I loved that. I even went back into Assassin's Creed 1 for like a really long time, we're just waiting for Assassin's Creed 2. And one thing I used to love to do with a friend of mine is we play horse in Assassin's Creed. So we'd like single player game, but we'd be like, all right, I'm going to go from this point to this point without hitting the ground. Let's see how far you get. If you fall, you get an H. You know, if I can do it, then we'll just keep like, now I get to pick the path. So really, I love it. I love Assassin's Creed, and they're some of my favorite games of all time, especially Ezio. Like I said, Ezio's family is a banger.
Gotcha. Awesome. Elegant, what about you? What game just, oh my God, it lived up to the hype and you just can't stop gushing about it?
Absolutely love this question, and I actually made a list now really quick while I was listening to your games. I'm going to give a shout out first of all to The Outer Worlds and Divinity Original Sin 2 and Dead Cells and Astral Chain. Those games did absolutely live up to the hype for me. I'm going to pick 2 here that I want to talk about, and the first one is such an easy one because it's Mass Effect 2. I at that point didn't play RPGs. Like I only played competitive shooters and had somewhat of a career in them, so I wasn't really interested in these types of games. Oh, I played Nintendo games also, like of course, because who doesn't? And I saw Mass Effect 2, and at first glance, I was like, this is something that interests me because it's sci-fi. I love that. The trailers look incredible. I see that the reviews are 10 out of 10s, like across the board. I was like, yeah, I was still holding off a little bit, but then I saw this, like, I thought it was a launch trailer, and I just jumped on it. And that game changed me as a gamer because at that point, this is no cap at all. I literally stopped playing competitive shooters. Like I was like, okay, RPGs, that's what I play now. Just inject them into my veins. And yeah, it's just such a fantastic game how it just transports you to this universe where it feels like this huge, vast open world when it's absolutely not. It's actually it's a corridor shooter, like a corridor cover shooter basically, and it just feels huge. And it still does because I played the Legendary Edition, and it just feels bigger than a lot of the open world games, which is wild, really. And it has this world building, this lore, these characters, the writing. It's kind of crazy. This hasn't just been copied and pasted to a movie because it's one of the like sci-fi greats, and I feel bad for all the gamers who haven't, like, for those who aren't gamers who never got to experience this, because it's such a fantastic universe. And I absolutely love Mass Effect, especially the trilogy. I thought Andromeda was fine, but it wasn't anything close to the trilogy. So yeah, and the other game I'm gonna just because I think this is more me hyping it up for myself, and that was A Plague Tale: Innocence, and it's basically I think it's the same case here. I didn't like stealth games, and I just love what they shown in terms of, I guess, in terms of atmosphere, and how they presented the game was just struck a chord with me, where I was like, I'm really interested in this, but I see the gameplay, and I usually don't like that sort of gameplay. And I think it was the same story here. There were like one trailer at one point where I ended up pre-ordering it, and I was like, this cannot, like, this will probably be a Game of the Year contender. And for me, it ended up being the Game of the Year for me that year, which was a great year. I think that game is just, I had played The Last of Us probably a year before that, and I didn't vibe with that game the way that most people did. And I feel like this game, not only did it have an incredible atmosphere and it had some incredible mechanics with the rats, which is just, it's genius. It's, yeah, I'm always so impressed when I'm playing that game because it's so clever. The level design is just fantastic. And the puzzle, like, I don't like puzzle games either. And I thought the puzzles they basically made you feel smart. And the solutions were just clever. It made you think, but it didn't break your brain. And when you saw the solution, you were like, oh, that's incredible. Like, now I feel smart. And they basically nudged you into the right direction without you really noticing it. But I think the thing that really stood out to me is that this isn't a stealth game. It is at first, but once you start upgrading your character, I went full on like action game with this. I don't think I stealthed my way through like any level after like 50% of the game. I just went full on bashing on the enemies.
So you went full on Boki.
Absolutely. It was full on Boki mode activated, and I loved it. I thought it was so cool that it was this character development where you upgraded your tools and also her like personal development, because at first she don't want to, I'm not going to spoil this, or I don't want to spoil this game, but at first she feels really horrified by having to defend herself basically by using violence, and she doesn't want that. And as you progress, you can choose whether to do it or not. And I think it solved a lot of the issues that I had with The Last of Us in terms of player agency. It has a surprising amount of player agency for what that game is. And yeah, it's one of my favorite games of all time. And it absolutely lived up to the hype for me because I was super hyped and just pre-ordered it after some consideration. And just, yeah, it's fantastic. And I wish more people played it because it's one of the best games ever made for me in terms of level design. I think it's incredible. So if someone's listening to this podcast and haven't even tried it, it's on Game Pass, I think, and stick with it because it's fantastic. It's just it's one of a kind.
I will give you that. I don't like stealth games. I don't like slow burns in games. Plague Tale was dope. The puzzles were fantastic. The way it made you use the world. It's so great. Game designers know that there are certain experiences that are best told when someone's holding a controller. A Plague Tale is that. You could read that story in a book. You could watch it in a TV show. That doesn't mean shit. It's you feeling the vulnerability that Amelia felt. But I will say, Hugo annoyed me, and I wanted to yeet him in the river. I
loved Hugo. I thought
he drove me nuts. I was like, this little boy, I got to hold his hand. Like I had friends watching and they were teasing me. They're like, that's your little brother. I was like, I don't care. He's going in the river. Is that your list, Elegant? Did you finish your list?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I think I just want to circle back to something that we talked about earlier with it, which is the identity, where you can like spot even if you don't know who the publisher is or the developer is, you can basically see that when you play the game. I think what's really cool with the Plague Tale Innocence was that I played Detroit Become Human, I think a couple of months before that. And there was, I don't remember exactly which level it was, but I played a certain level and I was like, this is kind of similar to something in Detroit Become Human, not in terms of how your character is moving, but just how it was built. And when I did some research, it turned out that, one of the guys who was a level designer on Detroit Become Human was actually a level designer in the Plague Tale Innocence. So that was almost scary. I was like, oh shit, you can actually feel that. Even if the gameplay is vastly different, there was something about the level design that stood out to me as sort of similar in some spots, which was super interesting to me.
Well done. That was that went over my head, and I played the shit out of Quantic Dream. That was fantastic job on spotting that. I had no idea. That's a really, really, really cool fact. I made a quick list on the fly. If I go by my own hype, like shit that I said I'm excited for, that I absolutely loved. Fallout 4, so much fun. I don't care. I've loved that game. The bugs are hilarious. It's huge. I love Fallout. New Vegas was my first. It was great. I loved Fallout 4. I also love The Outer Worlds. The Outer Worlds is probably one of my favorite RPGs to date ever. Obsidian killed it. I am buying a Series X just for you, Obsidian. I hope you're watching. But you too, Bethesda. I'll be honest. I love you both, and I'm buying a Series X just for you. Horizon Zero Dawn. I saw it, said this looks pretty cool. It was fucking epic. Holy crap, game blew me away. I've also been sold on franchises because of other people. I'm not normally a big puzzle person. I'm not known for being the most patient. I'm going to admit to you, I have shit to do. Okay. So I don't always sit there and go through puzzles. Never liked the older God of Wars. Didn't care. So people hyped God of War 2018. Epic game. I did not think I was going to like that game that much. So listening to other people did really well for me there. And Uncharted. I want to say my little brother got me into Uncharted at Uncharted 2. And I hated the first one, to be honest with you. And he made me play the second one. And I've loved everything in the series. So sometimes it's good to, if somebody really loves a game, give it a shot. So, hey, look, thanks for being here, gentlemen. This was a fantastic episode. I hope you guys had fun. And I'll make sure for everybody watching that you'll be able to follow these guys on Twitter in the pinned post below. As always, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for the guests. The guests absolutely make this show each and every week. You guys always kill it, and you make it everything that it is. So thanks for coming on, and we will see all of you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Everybody.